So, if you were thinking of getting your private pilot license, I think this is a video you are really going to enjoy. Hey there, my name is David Pierzynski. I'm a flight instructor and commercial pilot. In this video, I'm going to cover some topics you've probably already heard before, but I'm also going to go over some things you probably haven't seen or heard just yet. So, here's what we're going to cover in this video. First of all, we're going to cover what is involved in getting your private pilot license. How long does it take? Why now is such a good time to get involved in aviation, how to choose a school, an instructor, and also cover some super important caveats that I'm going to cover in this section of the video. And finally, we'll wrap up with the biggest mistakes that I see people making while pursuing a career in aviation. Many of these mistakes can lead to frustration, or I've seen many pilots give up during the program because things aren't just working out the way they wanted to. So if that sounds good to you, stick around because we're going to jump right into it. The private pilot license is the starting point of your aviation journey, and it can open up a whole new world of opportunity to you. But it's always good to know that there's a lot more opportunity out there, and right now is a fantastic time to take that journey and start your first step toward becoming a licensed pilot. Most commonly, when people get their private pilot license, the next step in their journey is to get an instrument rating. Then the next step, maybe they want to get their multi-engine rating or their commercial rating. And after that, there's a number of different instructor ratings that a pilot can pursue and try to receive. In my own experience, I actually received all of those ratings. I got my private pilot rating, then my instrument, then commercial, then CFI. Then I went and did my commercial multi, double I, and then multi-engine instructor. I did all of those through ATP. And when I signed up for the program, they were advertising 0 to CFII and MEI in about 7 months. Then while I was in the program, they switched it to 9, and now they're currently at 12. So while ATP was a fantastic program, and I feel like I became a very proficient pilot and learned lots from the resources and tools that they provided, the timeline that they offered just wasn't realistic. There's only so many planes, instructors, DPEs available, so to hit those timelines that they provided, it just, for most locations, wasn't possible to finish in the 7 or even 9 month timeline. So I ended up finishing in just about 12 months. And I believe, in hindsight, I could have easily finished in the 7 to 9 month time frame if there was enough instructors available, if the DPEs, if they had DPEs on call, aircraft availability, all of those things stacked up to make it so there wasn't a real opportunity to finish in that timeline. And we'll talk more in this video on details that can show that less than 6 months is actually possible to receive all of those ratings, and we can talk more later in this video of just how to do that. So I want to talk a little bit more to the folks who are thinking about becoming a private pilot, and maybe you want to start your journey to fly for a living, become a commercial pilot, and end up working for one of the airlines or becoming a certified flight instructor. So the first thing to know is that there has never been a better time to pursue the dream of aviation as a career. And the reason for that is very simple. There are massive waves of existing pilots that are retiring. And in addition to that, air travel is more popular than it's ever been. Airlines are breaking records every year. People are traveling more than they ever have before. So those two things combined means there's a huge pilot shortage right now, and that is expected to continue for the foreseeable future. In addition to those two factors, COVID happened, and that really accelerated things. It changed the demographics of current pilots, and right now, airlines are desperate to fill the pilot vacancies, which means not only are they currently hiring more than they ever have before, but they are also paying more. It's one of the most lucrative times to become a commercial pilot for an airline. So as an example, I decided to do Career 2.0. I came from technology sector, working specifically in SaaS and ad tech sales. While the money was good there, I just didn't have a lot of career fulfillment. And given that pilots' starting pay moved up to a 6-figure salary, and really the sky's the limit after that, they call it the $20 million career for a reason, that made me decide to make the shift and pursue a new career in aviation. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure to check the video I have linked down below, and know that just getting your private pilot's license is the first step along your path for this journey. So let's talk a little bit about prerequisites. What does it take to become a private pilot? Firstly, you need to be at least 17 years of age, and you need to have at least Category 3 medical. Now, if you're thinking of taking that journey and becoming a commercial pilot, I would recommend getting your first class medical, making sure you are eligible for that, because that would be necessary to fly for commercially for airlines. Next, you need to be able to read, speak, and write English proficiently. Of course, I'm talking about the FAA. We're here located in the United States. These criteria could be different depending on what country you're planning to fly for. I would say the next most important thing is go ahead and get yourself a discovery flight. So a discovery flight, if you've never ever flown before, the whole idea of a discovery flight is to kind of wet your whistle, get you used to the idea of flying a plane to see if you even like it. So during the discovery flight, you're going to go up with an instructor. You're going to be able to look out the window, see what it's like flying in some of these smaller training aircraft. They might let you take controls, practice, straight and level flight, maybe try a turn or two. And not everyone, but most people, you're going to get the bug at the end of that discovery flight. You're going to want to do this more and more, and you're going to realize that how awesome flying is, and you're going to want to pursue this maybe recreationally, maybe for a career. So let's talk a little bit about timeline. The rule of thumb is it's all over the map. Like from my experience, it took me a year, but to go from 0 to all of my ratings. You could do that in as little as 6 months. For your private pilot, that can take less than a month. Just really depends on your aptitude and your willingness to do the work and really put effort forth towards the program. But in addition to that, you need to have a program available to keep you accelerated if that's your goal. So in my case, like I said, I got it within a year. Now that was flying 3 to 5 days a week with some extended pauses waiting for check rides and weather in the winter. And it was my full-time job. I was focused 100% on completing these certificates in as fast a time as possible. So I know a lot of people come into this thinking that they have limited time or budget, and that was the same position I was in. And that's why I wanted to get it done as fast as possible. And the way it works is the faster you can get your ratings done and the faster you can go through the program, it's actually the less money you're going to spend overall. And I wish I knew that before I signed up with ATP. And that's the beauty of an accelerated program. The less time you're spending in between flights, the less stuff you need to relearn. The information that you do learn will stick better, and you're able to move much faster through the program while retaining all the information and not having to redo flights or relearn anything. And this is what helps keep the cost down. And that's the difference between trying to fly part-time or fly once a week. It's going to take you a whole lot longer, and it's going to be a whole lot more expensive, because every time you might take a step forward, you're going to take a step back as well in losing information that you've already learned, and you're going to have to relearn maneuvers, relearn regulations. And this is the reason why accelerated flight training is optimal to achieve your goals in aviation. So just know, the faster you decide to go, the faster you will get your private pilot license, the less money you're going to spend, and most importantly, the more proficient you're going to be after receiving that rating. So now let's talk a little bit about testing. How are you actually going to be tested so that you can actually get this certificate? So the FAA requires 3 different types of tests. You're going to have your written exam, you're going to have your oral exam, and then you're going to have your practical exam. The last 2 of those tests are going to be at the end of your training for that particular certificate or rating, and that's going to be called your check ride. While the written exam can be done anytime, and I personally recommend you do that at the beginning of your training. It's a great way to build foundational knowledge. So how do you get ready for that written exam when you literally don't know anything? And that's ground school. There's quite a number of different ground school providers out there today, and some of you, may be a lot smarter than me. You may not need ground school. The FAA produces enough materials out there. You can follow the ACS and you can virtually learn everything on your own without any guided study materials or courses. The most common FAA material that we utilize for ground school, specifically for private pilot, is called the PHAC. That is the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. This is just one of a number of books that are available from the FAA. These books are available for purchase on Amazon. You can also get them electronically if you prefer, like a Kindle type version. So the next most important book you're going to want to pick up is the FAR AIM. This is basically an encyclopedia of aviation knowledge. It's not the type of book that you're going to read cover to cover. It's more of a reference book where you can look certain things up that you need to understand or know the particular regulation for. So when it comes to what you're going to be tested on, the FAA does not keep that a secret. They actually publish these guidelines, and they're called the Airman Certification Status, the ACS. And this is extremely important to your training. It's not like the PHAC where it's giving you all the information you need for a particular rating. What the ACS is it's a guideline for each individual rating that or certification that you're going to try to achieve, and it's going to tell you exactly what areas of knowledge you need to have to complete the oral satisfactory and even the flight portion. And when you get to the oral and practical test with your DPE, basically anything that is pointed out in the ACS is fair game for your check ride. So it's fair game for them to ask you about and fair game to test you on in the airplane. And the ACS is extremely important. This is going to be your best friend when it comes to getting prepared for check rides. So for those of you that would rather save a couple bucks and study on your own, just know it's totally possible. There's enough resources and information available from the FAA for you to do so. But with that being said, there are plenty of online ground schools out there today that can make that job a lot easier and can guide you through the entire process to prepare you for the not only the oral, but practical standards and written exams. So I'll name a few of them. Gold Seal is what I would call the gold standard in ground school. They have modern graphics, videos, and really great step-by-step instructions on how to progress your knowledge for the written and oral exams. GLEM, and that's GLEIM, is one of them. King School's very famous one, most people have heard of. Another one is Sporties, and there are definitely more than that. There are plenty of ground schools out there available for you to choose from. And there is another option. You could work one-on-one directly with CFI on your ground schooling. Now, of course, this would be the most expensive option, but if you learn better that way, that's always a possibility to have that set up. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about testing, let's talk about the minimum requirements that the FAA is going to want you to meet. So number one, for a private pilot license, you're going to want to have 40 hours of flight time. And that's specific to the United States. If you're in another country, you're going to need to look up their specific regulations. Of that 40 hours, 20 hours must be with a certified flight instructor. And during those 20 hours, you're going to need at least 3 hours of cross country, 3 hours of instrument training, 3 hours of flight test prep, and 3 hours a night. Then, in addition to all of those dual hours, you will need to make up the difference to that 40 with additional solo hours. Now, going back to what I mentioned earlier, you're going to take 2 steps forward, maybe 1 step back with the accelerated training, hopefully less, 2 steps forward, half a step back. But because of that, you would want to budget at least 10 to 20 hours of additional training to make sure you're ready for your check ride. That 40 hours is just the minimum from the FAA. So now, decided you want to embark on this aviation journey, let's talk about how to choose a school and instructor. Now, most people are attending a school because they don't own an aircraft, but I just met a guy the other day who bought an aircraft first and then went out and found himself an instructor. So let's talk about schools a little bit. First of all, there's 2 main buckets for schools. You got your Part 61 and your Part 141s. In this video, I'm not going to go into great lengths describing the differences between those because you can easily Google that. But what I do want you to understand is a Part 141 school basically follows an approved FAA curriculum and generally takes longer than a Part 61 school. A Part 61 school, which is the one I attended, there is no approved FAA curriculum. They have their own internal curriculum that you will go through to meet the FAA test standards. So the beauty of a Part 61 school, since there is no set FAA curriculum. This means that you can learn at your own pace. So if you're a quick learner, we can push things along, and you're able to move through these certificates and ratings much faster than you would be able to at a Part 141. I'm a big fan of Part 61 schools, and I would encourage you to lean heavily into the bias of looking at those over Part 141, specifically if you want to spend less money and finish your training in as fast and most efficient way possible. Now let's talk about the differences between different schools, or actually the 3 or 4 major things that you should look for when trying to pick out the flight school that's right for you. So the number one thing to look for is that they offer enough aircraft to student ratio so that you're able to fly as often as possible to keep your program accelerated. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken with people who went to this school or that school, and they all had the problem with, they wanted to move fast and be in an accelerated program, but anytime they go to book an aircraft, they were unavailable. And that really slowed things down for them. So one way to figure this out, specifically with local schools, is just kind of hang out at the parking lot, maybe hang out at the school, talk to students, see how often they're flying, and just get a general idea of what the availability is like there. And if you're hearing a lot of, I'm only flying once a week because there aren't enough aircraft, or it's tough to book, you got to be ahead of the curve, all of these things, it just might not be the type of school that you want to end up working with. So number 2 is airplane maintenance. This is really important because they require a lot of it, specifically airplanes that are being used for instruction. There's annual inspections, 100-hour inspections, just general maintenance that needs to go on. So if you can find a school that has an in-house maintenance facility, this can definitely give you a better chance of keeping up in the skies and staying accelerated. The next best thing is to have a cozy relationship with an aircraft maintenance facility. So maybe it's not their own in-house maintenance facility, but it's a facility at the airport that they're at, or maybe they have someone on call that comes directly to them, and this just leads to less aircraft downtime. And number 3 is weather. So make sure obviously, when the weather's bad, you can't fly. And in the winter, that can be much more of an issue than it is in the summer. So you want to be training at a facility that has hangars, that has access to AATD simulators, and this way on cold days, the planes will be ready to go because they were in a hangar. Or if the weather is bad, you can get time working on the simulators they have available. So if you do live in a very cold area, what I would recommend is doing something we call sprint training. So this is where you might go down someplace and live, rent out a room for a month or so, and just fly every day until you finish up your certificate or rating. If work or life won't allow you to do that, maybe do a week on, week off, but in that week you're flying every day, maybe multiple times a day. And this way you can still get done in a very efficient and fast manner while not having to worry about cold weather and poor weather that isn't conducive to flying. In my own experience, weather was one of the big things that held me back. Now, I didn't have an option to go somewhere else for training, so that just wasn't in the cards for me. But it's something to consider if you do have that option. And number 4, this is most important if you're looking to accumulate multiple ratings and certificates like I did, and this is availability of DPEs. DPEs are designated pilot examiners. They are independent contractors that work for the FAA, and they are the ones who are going to administer the check rides and oral exams that we mentioned earlier. Now, if you're just getting your private pilot license and you want to fly recreationally, this isn't as big of a deal because then you only need to schedule one check ride. So having DPEs, regardless of which way you're trying to go, just for a private pilot license or for multiple certificates and ratings, can be a real big setback. I mean, in my own experience, I've heard of people waiting multiple months for a DPE, and that means they have to keep flying with their instructor to maintain proficiency, relearn things that might be becoming less prime in their brain and in their training. So having DPE availability is really one of the most important factors in sticking to an accelerated program. And of course, while you're trying to maintain proficiency, if you're waiting multiple months for a check ride, you're going to be spending more money for those flights and for that training, and this can increase the cost of your program. So ideally, you're finding a flight school and you're talking to students there, you're getting a feel of how long they're waiting for check rides, what the DPE availability is like there, and then you're asking if there is an approved FAA simulator at the facility. Now, in the private pilot phase of training, both of these things are going to be less important, but if you're looking to get multiple ratings, you're looking to multiple ratings and certificates, you're looking for that zero to hero pathway, then these two factors become the most important. Especially with instrument training, a good simulator is very necessary. And you can save money by using a FAA-approved simulator, because up to 20 hours of your instrument rating and up to 50 hours of your commercial rating can be done in a FAA-approved simulator. So in my experience, I had 20 hours during my instrument rating that I did in a simulator and 30 hours for my commercial training that I did in the simulator, and both of those added up to my hour totals, and that helped make the program much less costly for me. And the beauty of simulators is they don't care what the weather's doing, so you can fly them anytime, regardless of what it's like outside, regardless of airplane ability. So it's a great tool to have in the back pocket to keep your training progressing. Now, if you don't have access to a simulator at a school near you, but you're just going for your private pilot license, I would say, hey, go for it. That's totally fine. The other thing that I would really encourage you to do is get yourself a copy of Microsoft Flight Simulator, because you can learn a great deal from the simulator. Now, it's not FAA approved. These hours won't count towards any specific certificate or rating, but you can learn a lot of great stuff in there, and specifically learns different avionics configurations if you're flying different aircraft. Overall, it's just a really awesome tool to help you become proficient faster than you would without having this tool available to you. So now that we've talked about schools, let's talk a little bit about instructors. The number one thing I would encourage you to look for in your instructor is to make sure that you have good back and forth communication and rapport with one another. Let's face it, you're going to be sitting in the cockpit with this other person for a very long time, many hours of training, and if you don't really enjoy that person or like them, that's gonna set back your flight training. So it's really important to have that good rapport and communication with your instructor. Ideally, you're gonna want to have a really great bond with your instructor or instructors. You may be using more than one, and that's totally fine, because you're going to be spending a lot of time in the aircraft with them, and you want that to be enjoyable time. The other thing that I would encourage that you do, and this is especially true if you're interviewing an independent instructor, is make sure that you understand the process of how they're going to handle your training. And I use the process word very purposefully, because in my case, I am a very process-oriented individual. And so I have a written syllabus that I take my students through step by step, and I created it to align with what the FAA expects. And the reason that I did that is I wanted to make sure I was giving my students the best experience possible. And this way I was ensuring that I was not going to be neglectful or miss anything that the student needed to cover in their training or be trained on. And if you do that correctly, you're going to know exactly what you're going to be doing in every flight in the aircraft. So you know exactly what to expect, as opposed to just kind of randomly flying around a day. As much as that sounds a bit odd, randomly flying around a day, it does happen from time to time. And it's something you should try to avoid. You know, I've talked to students who have like way more hours than they should, and they don't even have their private pilot's license yet, or at least way more hours than I would expect it would take to get that license. I'm thinking myself, what are these instructors doing with you? And when I speak with these students, sometimes the answer was, well, we just kind of flew around a lot, worked on things that we've already worked on. There wasn't a lot of regimentation to the curriculum that the instructor was providing. So really the point of this section is just to be diligent about how you select your instructor, and pay attention and make sure that you understand what the teaching and training experience that they're going to give you is going to be like, and make sure that lines up with your expectations. All right, so now let's talk about the actual flying that you're going to do as a part of your training. So each and every flight, there's going to be a pre-flight, the actual flight, and a post-flight debrief. And that post-flight debrief is when your instructor is going to be giving you feedback on how you did, what you could do better, and things you can work on. And that three-step process is going to happen over and over again throughout your training. So the first milestone you're looking to reach is your first solo flight. That is the opportunity for you to go and fly with no one else in the aircraft. And that will happen at some point. In my case, I think it was about 15 or 20 hours in the aircraft. Some people take a little bit longer. Some people take shorter times. I know people who it only took 10 hours. But just know that there's a very detailed process laid out by the FAA for an instructor to approve your solo flight. And this is one of the most important aspects of your training. And as you can imagine, you're going to be flying an aircraft alone. So it can be dangerous if you're not ready for that opportunity. So just be mindful. The time it takes to get to that point can vary depending on student and instructor. In addition to your first solo flight, you're also going to get trained on cross-country flights. There's some really great tools out there that make it really easy to plan your cross-country flights. I like ForeFlight, and I recommend that all my students download and utilize ForeFlight in their training. The FAA is on board with you using ForeFlight. It's really a pilot's best friend, and when you get to your check ride, you're going to be able to use ForeFlight, but you're also going to want to know how to do it the old school way. So you're going to need to know the difference between true course, true heading, magnetic heading, all of these things, and being able to use pilotage and dead reckoning the old school ways is important for your flight training. So some other things you're going to be trained on. You're going to do things called short and soft field takeoffs and landings. These are different types of takeoffs and landings that are separate from regular takeoffs and landings. You're going to need to learn how to fly what's called under the hood. There are these things called foggles that limit your ability to see outside of the cockpit. Basically, what you're going to do is simulate you being in IFR conditions. So weather where you cannot see outside of the cockpit. And you're going to want to be proficient at using your instruments to fly the airplane. And you do this for your private pilot license in the off chance that you accidentally fly into a cloud or fly into weather where you're not able to visually see outside the aircraft and you have to rely on your instruments. You're also going to be trained to fly at night. Things are very different at night. Your ground references that you would see during the day aren't there. There's some illusions that you're going to have to become comfortable with. You're going to be trained on advanced communication, talking with tower, talking on the radio, talking on CTAF, all that kind of stuff. You need to be a good communicator in the air. And then, of course, emergency procedures, because things can and do go wrong, and you need to know what to do. Well, if my engine quits right now, what am I supposed to do? And there's a process for all of these situations that you might encounter. You can expect to be trained on each one of those situations to proficiency, so that if in the circumstance that you encounter any of these situations, you'll know exactly what to do and you'll be able to operate the aircraft safely. And then finally, you can expect to actually go out and fly those cross-country flights and not get lost. So it's one thing to plan it, but it's another thing to actually fly the route. And you need to be sure that when you leave, you know you're going from here to here to here, and you can actually get to those places without getting lost, without running out of gas, and so forth. So flying cross-country is a big part of getting your private pilot license. All right, I want to wrap up this video by talking about some of the biggest mistakes that people make during their private pilot training. And these mistakes are really important for you to understand, because if you make them yourself, there could be some really undesirable outcomes for you. Some of those outcomes: number one, it'll take you longer. Number two, you're going to spend way more money. Number three, you're going to feel really frustrated. And unfortunately, sometimes that frustration combined with the other 2 points above can lead people to stop training and never finishing up their certification or ratings. And it's really sad when that happens. So the biggest thing that I can, and that I've already talked about before, but I want to recap because it's so darn important to you. When you choose a school, make sure you pay attention to the things we've covered so far in this video. Do they have a lot of airplanes? Do they have enough instructors? Are the students getting enough flying time? Are the planes well maintained? And how long does it typically take for their students to get to a check ride? So are there DPs available? And then the next thing is the frequency of your training. How to get all of your ratings in less than 6 months. Very simple. Fly every day, unless there is bad weather or thunderstorms. And if there is, you can sim. Fly as often as possible and make sure you have the smallest gap in between flights. This will keep your proficiency high and keep you moving and progressing along in your training without having to take too many steps back. And by moving forward and progressing, the knowledge is literally going to compound on itself. And in the end, this will help you save a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money. Flying once a week is just not enough. It will take you forever. Flying twice a week is the bare minimum. Flying 3 times a week is even better, and flying 4 to 5 times a week is better yet. Now, I totally understand not everyone has the budget to do that, but just know the overall budget it will take you to achieve whatever certificate or rating you're looking to accomplish, that overall budget will end up being higher the longer that you take. So you might say, well, I can only fly this often because I only have this money and come over this period of time. So maybe what you want to do is to delay the start of your training until you have some savings in place so that you can fly more often once you start, so that you don't actually have to spend as much money as if you were just kind of doing it piecemeal whenever you had a couple extra bucks to build to afford another flight. And then finally, I think one of the biggest mistakes, or At least a big mistake that people make is not understanding the ACS and not using the ACS to get ready for the oral exam. After that, I'd say the next biggest mistake is working with an instructor that maybe you're just not super stoked about. The stories I've heard of people of just kind of not having a great experience with their flight instructor. They just had a part-time instructor who wasn't available often, or they had a flight instructor that didn't really seem to be super focused or didn't have a really regimented curriculum, or whatever the case may be. But the point is, your instructor can have a profound impact on your training, whether positively or negatively, and that can profoundly impact your total flight experience and how you end up achieving your goals. So make sure you're just really diligent about who you choose to work with. You may even want to have more than one discovery flight with multiple instructors to get a feel for them. Or if you're at a larger school, maybe you train with multiple instructors. You kind of move around until you find the one you mesh with best. And this is essential because the chemistry between you and your instructor is incredibly important, and it will make your training a whole lot more enjoyable. Now, if you want to come and train with me, I'm happy to do that, and all the information that you need can be found right here. It'll also be in the description. It's on the jetwithjoe.com website, and there will be an accelerated training program link, and that's where I put all of my information that you would need. So if you're interested in doing any accelerated training, please go check that out and then fill out a new student application, and I will get in touch with you promptly after that. Or if you disagree with me or anything that I've covered in this video, I would love for you to put that down in the comments below. It serves a number of purposes. Number one, the other people in the Jet with Joe community get to hear your perspective, which I think is very important. Number two, the more comments and engagement there are in the video, the more the YouTube algorithm will show this video to other people, which would be a huge thank you to me for making it. And it gives you the opportunity to ask me questions and receive answers for myself, because I do actively engage and monitor the comments to all of these videos. So if you really enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you would smash that like button. And if this is your first time watching one of my videos and you're not yet a subscriber, and you'd like to see more of my videos in the future, maybe consider becoming a subscriber and clicking that little bell so that you get notifications of future videos I produce. So thank you very much for hanging out with me for however long this video was. I won't know until the editor's done editing it. It's been a pleasure to have you here. I hope that this has been helpful to you, and I look forward to reading and responding to your comments right below this video. Take care, have a great day, and we'll see you here in another video soon. Thanks.